No, the only reason I was sent up here was to wait for you. When Major Sheldrake's posting came through, I was meant to get everything from him and pass it on. As it happened, and this had nothing to do with me, there was a 48-hour gap between the Major's departure and my arrival. He paused again. It sounded like he had prepared this explanation with care. Apparently the Yanks kicked up an almighty fuss, even though the rail shipment was locked in a guarded room and your sealed envelope was in the safe in the CO's office. They insisted that someone had to be directly responsible for the stuff at all times. There were phone calls to the CO's office from the Brigadier, which originated with General Staff. There was nothing anyone could do. They came over in a lorry and took the lot. Envelope, shipment, the lot. Then I arrived. My new instructions were to wait for you, which I've been doing for 5 days, make sure you are who you say you are, and explain the situation, and give you this contact address. Lofting took a manila envelope from his pocket and passed it across the table. At the same time, Leonard handed over his bona fides. Lofting hesitated. He had one remaining piece of bad news. The thing is this. Now that your stuff, whatever it is, has been signed over to them, you have to be too. You've been handed over. For the time being, you're their responsibility. You take your instructions from them. That's all right, Leonard said. I'd say it was jolly hard luck. His duty done, Lofting stood and shook his hand. The army driver who had brought Leonard from Tempelhof Airport earlier that afternoon was waiting in the Olympic Stadium car park. Leonard's quarters were a few minutes' drive away. The corporal opened the trunk of the tiny khaki car, but he did not seem to think it was his business to lift the cases out. Platenallee 26 was a modern building with a lift in the lobby. The apartment was on the 3rd floor and had 2 bedrooms, a large living room, a kitchen dining room, and a bathroom. Leonard still lived at home with his parents in Tottenham and commuted each day to Dollis Hill. He strode from room to room, turning on all the lights. There were various novelties. There was a big wireless with creamy push-buttons and a telephone standing on a nest of coffee tables. By it was a street plan of Berlin. There was army-issue furniture, a 3-piece suite of smudgy floral design, a pouf with leather tassels, a standard lamp that was not quite perpendicular, and, against the far wall of the living room, a writing bureau with fat bow legs. He luxuriated in the choice of bedroom, and unpacked with care. His own place. He had not thought it would give him so much pleasure. He hung his best, second-best, and everyday grey suits in a wardrobe built into the wall whose door slid at the touch of the hand. On the bureau he placed the teak-lined, silver-plated cigarette box engraved with his initials, a going-away present from his parents. By its side he stood his heavy indoor lighter, shaped like a neoclassical urn. Would he ever have guests? Only when everything had been arranged to his satisfaction did he allow himself to sit in the armchair under the standard lamp and open the envelope. He was disappointed. It was a scrap of paper torn from a memo pad. There was no address, only a name, Bob Glass, and a Berlin telephone number. He had wanted to spread out the street plan on the dining table, pinpoint the address, plan his route. Now he would have to take directions from a stranger, an American stranger, and he would have to use the phone, an instrument he was not easy with, despite his work. His parents didn't have one, nor did any of his friends, and he rarely had to make calls at work. Balancing the square of paper on his knee, he dialed painstakingly. He knew how he wanted to sound. Relaxed, purposeful. Leonard Markham here. I think you've been expecting me. Straight away, a voice rapped out, Glass?" Leonard's manner collapsed into the English dither he had wanted to avoid in conversation with an American. "Oh, yes, look, I'm terribly sorry. Is that Markham?" "Actually, yes. Leonard Markham here. I think you've been—" "Write down this address. 10 Nollendorfstrasse off the Nollendorfplatz. Get here tomorrow morning at 8. The line went dead while Leonard was repeating the address in his friendliest voice. He felt foolish. In solitude, he blushed. He caught sight of himself in a wall mirror and approached helplessly. His glasses, stained yellowish by evaporated body fat, this at least was his theory, perched absurdly above his nose. When he removed them, his face appeared insufficient. Along the sides of his nose were red pressure streaks, dents in the very bone structure. He should do without his glasses. The things he really wanted to see were up close. A circuit diagram, a valve filament, another face. A girl's face. His domestic calm had vanished. He paced his new domain again, pursued by unmanageable longings. At last he disciplined himself by settling at the dining table to a letter to his parents. Composition of this kind cost him effort. He held his breath at the beginning of each sentence and let it go with a gasp at the end. "Dear Mum and Dad, the journey here was boring, but at least nothing went wrong. I arrived today at 4 o'clock. I have a nice flat with 2 bedrooms and a telephone. I haven't met the people I am working with yet, but I think Berlin will be all right. It's raining here, and it's awfully windy. It looks pretty damaged, even in the dark. I haven't had a chance to try out my German yet." Soon, hunger and curiosity drove him outdoors. He had memorized a route from the map and set off eastward towards Reichskanzlerplatz. Leonard had been 14 on VE Day, old enough to have a head full of the names and capabilities of combat planes, ships, tanks, and guns. He had followed the Normandy landings and the advances eastward across Europe and, earlier, northward through Italy. Only now was he beginning to forget the names of every major battle. It was impossible for a young Englishman to be in Germany for the first time and not think of it above all as a defeated nation, or feel pride in the victory. He had spent the war with his granny in a Welsh village over which no enemy aircraft had ever flown. He had never touched a gun, or heard one go off outside a rifle range. Despite this, and the fact that it had been the Russians who had liberated the city, he made his way through this pleasant residential district of Berlin that evening. The wind had dropped, and it was warmer, with a certain proprietorial swagger, as though his feet beat out the rhythms of a speech by Mr. Churchill. As far as he could see, the restoration work had been intense. The pavement had been newly laid, and spindly young plane trees had been planted out. Many of the sites had been cleared. The ground had been levelled off, and there were tidy stacks of old bricks chipped clear of their mortar. The new buildings, like his own, had a 19th-century solidity about them. At the end of the street, he heard the voices of English children. An RAF officer and his family were arriving home, satisfying evidence of a conquered city. He emerged onto Reichskanzlerplatz, which was huge and empty. By the ochre gleam of newly erected concrete lampposts, he saw a grand public building that had been demolished down to a single wall of ground-floor windows. In its centre, a short flight of steps led to a grand doorway with elaborate stonework and pediments. The door, which must have been massive, had been blasted clean away, allowing a view of the occasional car headlights in the next street. It was hard not to feel boyish pleasure in the 1,000-pounders that had lifted roofs of buildings, blown their contents away to leave only facades with gaping windows. 12 years before, he might have spread his arms, made his engine noise, and become